Misfits Boxing Event 1. I am your host, Jacob Cooperman with Gloves Up, Episode 7. I wanted to give my general thoughts on the event, some of the outcomes, and something that I realized about both KSI's and Jake's boxing careers. So let's get into it. Off the bat, I realized that there is a large gap between Jake Paul and KSI in terms of the legitimacy of the events they put on. Now, I don't want my words to be minced here. I thought that KSI put on a fantastic YouTube boxing event. By far, not a question in my mind. That is, what we saw today is the best, most professional looking outing for YouTube boxing to date. I think the most important thing you want to have in an event is an event that looks good. The fighters all come to fight, which was the case with, I'd say, 90% of the guys that they had fighting that night. We'll get to the main event in a second. The fights have to be interesting. And listen, Misfits Boxing Event 1 ticked off all of these boxes. The difference, though, between what KSI is doing with these events and what Jake is doing is Jake's still feels more professional. Like, it's one thing to say, here is an event that JJ put on where you could say, hey, this is it looks professional. Everything about it is professional. But when it comes down to the fights and the personalities themselves, we're just putting on a professional coat of paint, basically. With Jake's, there is still, I feel, a large gap between the fighters that he has on, because, you know, he mixes it up with real guys, actual boxers, and he puts people on the card, and sure, it's some celebrities in the past, but for the most part, Jake does a good job. He's partnered up with Showtime of getting professional guys on there. It feels to me that there is still a long ways to go for KSI to catch up to where Jake is, right? And that's just the case with anyone that's trying to break into the scene, because as we covered last episode, Jake Paul already did this. KSI, like he said he would, has revolutionized YouTube boxing. I thought, you know what, honestly, that KSI shouldn't even try to think about touching Jake Paul. I think it's a great money fight. I think it would get a lot of fans interested for sure. But if JJ wants to go do his own thing, where he's just putting on these YouTube boxing events, he could very well be fine doing that. That is what I think premier out of all the things I learned tonight, that is what I learned the most, is that these YouTube boxing events, I don't even think they need professional boxers in there. I'd watch an entire card full of what I saw tonight. Get this, you have entertainers, right? And that's what I think a lot of people would agree that boxing is missing. Regular mainstream boxing is the guys with engaging personalities. Then you put them in there and you have everyone look like they look tonight. There was a really, really good mix. You know what it is? It's kind of like, it's almost like someone mixed some of the stuff from the UFC and they put it into a boxing match. Terrific. But then also guys competently boxing. Faye Sensei versus Kenny was the most technical fight of the night, but you wouldn't have been able to know that it wasn't a professional boxing match. Like, if I showed you that fight and I said, this is not, and I didn't tell you anything about the fact that it might have been a YouTube boxing event, you wouldn't have been able to tell me that that was not a real boxing match. While it looked professional, and, you know, there's a difference between looking professional and actually being professional. I think that's the difference between Jake and KSI, who at this point, screw being professional, KSI has opened up his own lane. The potential for expansion here is insane. This was an engaging event. They cut out the bullshit of past events where they had all these musical dances and musical numbers. They toned down a little bit that more gladiatorial type of thing that, I mean, to my detriment, I thought we were gonna see tonight. If you go back to the last video, that's what I said. There was none of that. And I thought that they trimmed away a lot of the fat, and this was a really, really entertaining night of fights. Now, getting down to how the fighters fought, I thought Deji looked fantastic. A lot of people were saying if he gets I believe it would have been his third loss if he had gotten a loss tonight, then he's finished. He's cooked. He's done. And then Fuzi, who had an 18-pack coming into this, looked unstoppable. But Deji really performed. He was, first off, accurate. Second off, aggressive. His last fight, that was the main thing. The main knock against Deji was that he was not aggressive enough, right? He didn't push the pace. He didn't throw anything, basically. And this fight, he addressed all of that and one-upped his game. This is better than, I feel like, the Deji that we saw against Jake Paul. If not, maybe on par with the Deji we saw against Jake Paul. Because that I got shades of that Deji. And that's one of the best things you can ask for from a guy that needed a win desperately. This showed that, you know, when Deji is on, he's on. Big credit to him. He's got some big money fights on the line. Then you had Slim, man. I gotta be honest, people, I didn't know who that kid was coming into this. I heard that he had flatlined a couple people, and that's exactly what he did to FaZe Temper tonight, man. What a fight. I mean, that's another guy. Slim, man, Slim looked good. Same with Temper. Temper didn't look bad. It just, Slim was way more technical. He, again, pushed the pace. I'd love to see Slim versus Deji. I'd love to see Slim versus KSI at some point. I don't know if FaZe Sensei retired after that horrific judge call, but, you know, I'd love to see him get back out there and get active. Man, there was just so many guys tonight. KSI looked terrific. He had power. Not as technical as I thought he'd be. Definitely not as technical, though, but still looked good nonetheless. Looked like he had improved. I liked him and his brother embracing after the fact. I just think, and then, you know, connecting it to outside fights that could take place, like Gib, like all these different guys. Jake Paul, of course, was going to get in on the mix, even though, I think that's beneath him at this point. The only real knock I'd say I have on the event was just the two guys that KSI fought. Swarms, I didn't really expect anything from. I thought that his best chance was, again, not to make a joke, Swarm KSI. But the main eventer, the guy who was supposed to be a pro, talk about either just not wanting to be in there, wanting to collect a check, or just a combination of the two, man. It just a poor outing, a poor performance. And it's no fault of KSI because he had to find a late replacement to a late replacement. So this was all thrown together very quickly, but I'm excited to see what KSI does against guys that are less than tomato cans. This was not a tomato can type of fight. This was like a rotten tomato can. This was a tomato can that you found in a dumpster behind a building. This was not a fair outing for KSI, and I thought, I'll say it for the fourth time this video, fantastic event. Just one more thing that I wanted to talk to you guys about. Did you guys think it was weird that KSI didn't mention Jake Paul? Do you think he's building up to a mega fight with Jake? Because I could say all the stuff that I want to about how I think that's a bad idea. At the end of the day, that's ultimately up to KSI and Jake. It seems like either KSI knows that maybe Jake's out of that realm already, or he's looking to kind of build up to a fight like that. Those are the two options that make sense to me in my head. But I found it weird that he didn't mention Jake's name, and I think Jake took to Twitter to mirror my sentiments. He said, it's weird that KSI didn't say my name. Yeah. But that's been my thoughts on the fights. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. It's been Gloves Up, episode 7. I've been your host, the Jewish Jawline, the soundboard god. And I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.